There are some moments in life that split your world into two versions: the version before humiliation and the version after it. For me, that moment happened under crystal chandeliers in one of Boston's most expensive hotels, when my mother slapped me across the face in front of 127 wedding guests because I refused to hand my sister a $2 million penthouse. The sound echoed through the ballroom so loudly the jazz band stopped playing mid-song. My earring hit the marble floor, and for one terrifying second nobody moved. Not the judges, not the attorneys, not the investors sipping champagne 2 feet away. Everyone just stared, because rich families don't implode quietly. They implode in public while pretending they're still elegant. But what nobody in that ballroom understood yet was this: my mother had spent 3 years lying to everyone. In 1 hour after that slap, the person she told the world was confused, unstable, and losing her memory walked through those ballroom doors holding proof that could destroy everything. Before I tell you how my grandmother exposed my mother in front of Boston's legal elite, take a second to like and subscribe if you love emotional family drama stories like this. And comment below, have you ever had a family member try to humiliate you publicly just to control you? Now let me take you back to where this really started. 3 years earlier, March 2021. I was sitting alone in my tiny Somerville apartment eating cold pad thai straight from the container while reviewing renovation sketches for a client kitchen remodel. Nothing glamorous, just me, a drafting table, bills stacked near the coffee maker, and the constant anxiety of trying to grow an interior design business nobody in my family respected. That's when my grandmother called. "Paige," Eleanor Harrison said calmly, "I need you to listen carefully." My grandmother had taught constitutional law at Harvard for over 30 years. She wasn't dramatic. She didn't waste words. So the second I heard that tone, I sat up straighter. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," she replied. "I'm updating my estate documents." Then she paused. "And I'm leaving you the Seaport Penthouse." For a second, I thought I misunderstood her. The Seaport Penthouse? A luxury waterfront property she bought years earlier for $1.8 million, now worth well over $2 million. I slowly set my food down. "Grandma, why me?" Not because I didn't want it. Because I genuinely didn't understand. There was silence on the line for a moment. Then Eleanor answered softly, "Because you're the only one who stayed." That sentence hit harder than the inheritance itself because it was true. Every Sunday for nearly 10 years I visited her. Not for money, not for favors, just because I loved her. I brought tulips because they were her favorite. I fixed her television remote. I listened to the same stories twice when she forgot she'd already told them. Meanwhile, my mother sent holiday cards through assistants. And my younger sister Madison, sometimes 6 months passed without a single phone call. "You sit with me when you have nothing to gain," Grandma continued quietly. "That matters more than people realize." I could feel tears threatening already, but with my family, emotions were dangerous things, especially visible ones. "The paperwork will finalize next month," she added. "Marcus Webb is handling everything." Then her voice shifted slightly. "Your mother is not going to take this well." That turned out to be the understatement of the century. Because somehow the news reached my family within weeks. And by April, my mother had organized what she called a family discussion at our Beacon Hill brownstone. Except it wasn't a discussion. It was an ambush. I still remember walking into that living room and immediately realizing they'd arranged themselves like a courtroom. My father sat in his leather chair near the fireplace. My mother lounged elegantly on the sofa wearing cream silk like she was hosting a charity gala. And Madison perched beside her looking perfectly styled and devastatingly pleased with herself. Meanwhile, the only seat left for me was a stiff wooden chair directly facing all three of them, like I was the defendant. And the second I sat down, my mother smiled at me the way people smile before delivering bad news. "Paige," she said softly, "we need to discuss your grandmother's condition." The second my mother said the word condition, I understood this meeting had nothing to do with concern. It was about control. I sat in that stiff wooden chair staring at the three of them arranged across the living room like judges preparing a verdict. Beacon Hill sunlight spilled through enormous windows onto polished hardwood floors and museum-level furniture my mother constantly reminded everyone was imported from Milan. Everything in that house existed to impress people. Nothing in it ever felt warm. She seems perfectly fine to me, I said carefully. My mother crossed her legs slowly, Cartier bracelet glinting under the chandelier. Paige, she sighed, a rational grandmother does not leave a $2 million penthouse to one grandchild while excluding the rest of her family. There it was, not concern for grandma, not concern for fairness, just money. I leaned back slightly. She isn't excluding anyone, I replied calmly. She's making her own decision. Madison immediately let out this dramatic little laugh-sob hybrid she'd perfected sometime around college. That's easy for you to say, she muttered. You're the one getting a luxury penthouse. My younger sister had spent her entire life confusing envy with injustice. Everything she wanted automatically became something she believed she deserved. Designer bags, luxury vacations, a fiancé from an old money family, and now apparently my inheritance. Dad finally spoke from beside the fireplace. Richard Harrison, corporate attorney. Expert in sounding reasonable while saying terrible things. The fair solution, he said evenly, would be selling the property and splitting the proceeds equally among family. I stared at him. This man had missed my college graduation because of a golf tournament, forgotten birthdays, never visited my design studio once, and suddenly he wanted to lecture me about fairness? No, I answered simply. The room went still. Mom's smile tightened instantly. No, she repeated, I'm not selling it. Madison sat upright immediately. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Mom's expression hardened slowly into something colder. Paige, she said quietly, families make sacrifices for each other. Interesting sentence, because in our family, sacrifices only ever moved in one direction, toward Madison. When I needed help building my business, I was told to figure it out. When Madison wanted a destination engagement party in Napa, my parents practically funded a small royal wedding. She made her decision, I said firmly. If you don't like it, talk to Grandma. Big mistake. The temperature in the room changed instantly. My mother's face went completely still, not emotional, controlled, which was always worse. You have no idea what you're doing, she said softly. And for the first time, I felt genuinely uncomfortable, not because of the inheritance, because of the way she said it, like this conversation wasn't finished. Like she already had plans forming behind her eyes. The fallout started quietly after that. Too quietly? That should have warned me. By summer, I noticed I'd disappeared from family events. No invitations, no updates. No group messages. I found out Madison got engaged through Instagram. A champagne photo at the Boston Harbor Hotel with the caption, "Future Mrs. Caldwell sparkles, nobody had told me, not even as courtesy." When I finally asked my mother about it, she laughed lightly. "Oh, we assumed you were busy with your decorating business." Decorating business? Not design firm, not company, not career, just another way to shrink me. My little decorating business had 12 active clients and was making more money than it ever had before. But in my mother's world, success only counted if it looked impressive at charity galas. Then the rumors started. That was the worst part. At social events, I overheard whispers. Paige manipulated a leaner. She pressured her. You know, elderly people can be vulnerable. My mother painted me like some greedy opportunist exploiting a fragile old woman. And I stayed quiet through all of it. That's the part I regret most now. I thought silence would protect me. I thought if I acted mature enough, calm enough, eventually people would realize the truth on their own. But silence doesn't stop manipulators, it protects them. Around that same time, Grandma moved into Brookhaven Senior Living, a luxury assisted living facility outside Boston. She claimed she wanted peace and quiet. But something about it never felt right. Sometimes during our Sunday visits, I'd catch strange flashes in her expression. Fear, real fear. One afternoon, I finally asked, "Did something happen between you and Mom?" Grandma stared out across the garden for a very long time before answering. Some truths become dangerous once people profit from them. That sentence stayed with me for years. At the time, I didn't fully understand it, but I would. Eventually, 3 years later, an ivory wedding invitation arrived in my mailbox. And the second I opened it, I realized my family suddenly wanted me back in the picture again. The wedding invitation arrived on a freezing December afternoon. Heavy ivory cardstock, gold embossed lettering, elegant enough to cost more than my monthly electric bill. I stood in my design studio turning it over in my hands while snow drifted past the windows outside. For almost 2 years, my family had treated me like I no longer existed. No birthdays, no holidays. No random calls, nothing, and suddenly they wanted me at Madison's wedding. That alone should have made me suspicious. Inside the envelope, the details screamed old money Boston elegance. The Fairmont Copley Plaza, black tie. March 15th, 2024. I stared at the invitation for a long moment, because deep down, I already knew this wasn't about reconciliation. Families like mine don't suddenly heal without a reason. My phone rang that same evening. Mother, I almost didn't answer, but curiosity is dangerous when you grow up emotionally starved. Paige, sweetheart? The warmth in her voice nearly made me laugh. I hadn't heard that tone since before Grandma changed her will. I assume you received Madison's invitation? I did. Wonderful. She paused dramatically. This wedding is such a beautiful opportunity for healing. There it was, healing. Another favorite manipulator word. Translation, let's pretend the last 3 years never happened. I stayed quiet. Then her voice shifted slightly, subtle, calculated. I've also been thinking, she continued, about the Penthouse situation. And suddenly the entire phone call made sense. Of course, the invitation wasn't an olive branch, it was leverage. Mom, I said carefully, there is no Penthouse situation. You could gift it to Madison? I actually pulled the phone away from my ear for a second because I thought I misheard her. What? She's starting a new life with Tyler, Mom continued smoothly. They need a home appropriate for their status. Status. Always status. Madison's fiancé came from one of Boston's wealthiest legal families, and my mother treated that engagement like a royal merger between empires. The Penthouse belongs to me, I answered flatly. Think how generous it would look. Look, not feel, not mean. Look, everything with my mother was performance. You want me to give Madison a $2 million property as a wedding gift? She's your sister. She's also not entitled to my inheritance. The warmth vanished instantly. Like a light switch. Tyler's family expects certain things, Mom snapped. Do you understand the circles Madison is entering? That sentence told me everything. This wasn't about family, it was about appearances. About impressing Boston elites. About my mother using my inheritance to elevate Madison's image. Then Tyler's parents can buy them a home, I replied quietly. Silence stretched between us. Cold silence. Then finally, I expect you to think carefully before the wedding. The line went dead. I sat there staring across my studio while winter light faded across fabric samples and blueprints. And for the first time, I seriously considered not going. Because I understood exactly what would happen if I attended and refused publicly. My mother would punish me socially. She'd paint me as selfish, ungrateful, cold. She'd use every connection in Boston's legal and charity circles to quietly poison my reputation. And in industries like mine, reputation matters, especially when wealthy clients talk to each other. But not going felt worse somehow, like surrender, like admitting I'd done something wrong when I hadn't. So eventually, I RSVP'd yes. Worst decision of my life. 1 week before the wedding, my grandmother called unexpectedly at 7 in the morning. And the second I heard her voice, I knew something was wrong. Paige, she said urgently, I need you to listen carefully. I sat upright instantly. What happened? If something happens at that wedding, and I believe it will, I need you to call Marcus Webb immediately. I grabbed a pen from beside my bed. Okay, she slowly read me the number, then her voice dropped lower. Your mother believes I don't know what she's planning. A chill went through me instantly. What is she planning? Silence. Then, I don't know exactly, but I know Victoria. And Victoria never creates a public moment unless she thinks she already controls the ending. My stomach tightened. Grandma, you're scaring me. I'm trying to prepare you. Another pause, then her voice softened. Marcus has everything ready if you need it. Everything? What does that mean? But she ignored the question completely. Instead, she said something that terrified me even more. If your mother corners you publicly, don't sign anything. My pulse spiked instantly. Sign what? But before she answered, someone knocked on my studio door, and standing outside smiling at me was Madison. Madison stood outside my studio smiling like we were normal sisters. Like the last 3 years hadn't happened. Like my mother hadn't just warned me about making the right choice days before her wedding. For a second, I genuinely wondered if she knew what was happening behind the scenes. Then she walked inside carrying garment bags and champagne, and I realized she absolutely did. Surprise, she laughed brightly. The performance was flawless. Designer coat, perfect curls, diamond engagement ring the size of a small planet catching every light in the room. Everything about Madison looked polished, curated, expensive. Meanwhile, I stood there in leggings holding a pencil behind my ear like I'd been caught off guard by a tornado wearing Chanel. "What are you doing here?" I asked carefully. "I thought we could have sister time." Sister time. Interesting phrase from someone who hadn't voluntarily spoken to me in months. She placed the champagne on my drafting table and wandered through the studio slowly, examining fabric swatches and sketches like she was touring a small museum. "This place is cute," she said casually. "Cute, not successful, not impressive. Cute." I almost smiled. Some things never change. Madison stopped near the windows overlooking Somerville traffic. "You know," she said lightly, "Mom's really stressed about the wedding." There it was. We weren't here for bonding. We were here for negotiation. I leaned against my desk. "She seems more stressed about my apartment." Madison laughed softly like I'd made a harmless joke, but her eyes stayed cold. "Tyler and I already told people we'd probably move into the penthouse after the honeymoon." I blinked slowly. "You told people what?" Her expression tightened slightly. "Paige, come on, it just makes sense." "No, what made sense was asking before planning your future around someone else's property." But Madison had spent her entire life assuming the world would eventually rearrange itself for her comfort. "It belongs to me," I said evenly. "It belongs to family." "No," I corrected quietly. "Grandma left it to me?" Madison's entire demeanor shifted after that, not dramatically, just enough. The warmth disappeared from her eyes first, then the smile became thinner, sharper. "You don't even need it," she muttered. That sentence hit something deep inside me, because growing up that was always the justification. Paige doesn't need much, Paige is easy, Paige will understand. Meanwhile, Madison received everything bigger, better, more important. "What exactly do you think I deserve?" I asked softly. She crossed her arms. "I think Grandma made an emotional decision. Interesting, not irrational, not unfair, emotional, as if love itself somehow invalidated Grandma's choice." I looked at my sister carefully, really looked at her. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect posture, and underneath all of it panic, tiny, hidden, but there. Because suddenly I realized something. Madison wasn't confident I'd say yes. She was scared I'd say no, and that meant plans were already moving. "Did Mom tell you she already asked me to transfer the penthouse as a wedding gift?" I asked quietly. Madison didn't even look surprised. That told me everything. "She's trying to help everyone move forward." Forward, another manipulator word. Meaning, give us what we want so we can stop being angry. I walked toward the champagne slowly and picked up the bottle. "You know what's interesting?" I said calmly. Madison frowned slightly. "What? You all keep talking about the penthouse like it already belongs to you." Silence. Then finally, "You're being selfish." There it was. The word every family uses when boundaries inconvenience them. I laughed softly, and Madison's face hardened instantly. "What's funny? That nobody cared about Grandma's wishes until money got attached to them." The room went completely still. For one dangerous second, Madison looked exactly like our mother. Same expression, same coldness, same fury barely hidden beneath elegance. "You always thought you were better than us," she whispered. That one surprised me. Because the truth was actually the opposite. I spent most of my life believing I mattered less. "I never thought I was better," I answered quietly. "Then prove it." I stared at her, and suddenly everything became clear. This wasn't a request anymore. It was a test. Hand over the penthouse, prove your loyalty, restore your place in the family, or refuse and become the villain permanently. Madison stepped closer. "Mom says you'll do the right thing at the wedding." The way she said it made my stomach twist. At the wedding, not before, publicly. That's when I understood the real plan. They wanted witnesses, an audience, a public moment they could control. And suddenly Grandma's warning echoed in my head. Victoria never creates a public moment unless she thinks she already controls the ending. My pulse started pounding. Because for the first time, I realized my mother wasn't hoping I'd cooperate. She was planning for me not to. The morning of the wedding felt like walking toward a car crash you already knew was coming. Cold March rain streaked across Boston windows while I stood in my apartment staring at 3 different dresses laid across my bed. Too elegant would look arrogant. Too simple would look pathetic. That's the thing people don't understand about toxic families. You spend years calculating how not to become a target. I finally chose navy blue, classic, understated, impossible to criticize openly. Though honestly, my mother could have criticized Oxygen if it disappointed her publicly. By 5 o'clock, the Fairmont Copley Plaza glowed like a palace. Valets, crystal chandeliers, luxury cars lining the entrance. Every inch of the hotel screamed old money Boston wealth. And somewhere inside all of it, my mother was preparing a performance. The ballroom was breathtaking, white orchids draped from towering centerpieces. A jazz band played softly near the dance floor. Champagne floated through the crowd on silver trays. I counted at least a dozen recognizable attorneys before I even reached cocktail hour. Judges, partners from major firms. Investment families, charity board members. This wasn't a wedding, it was a social exhibition. Exactly the kind of audience my mother loved most. 127 guests, every one of them potential witnesses. The second I entered the ballroom, I felt it. The whispers, the glances, people pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. Because my mother had spent years quietly shaping a narrative about me, greedy granddaughter, manipulative daughter. The girl who took advantage of poor Eleanor Harrison. I suddenly realized I wasn't attending a wedding. I was walking into a courtroom where everyone already thought they knew the verdict. Dad found me first near the ice sculpture centerpiece. A swan, naturally, because nothing in my mother's world could simply exist without trying too hard. Paige, no hug. No warmth, just acknowledgement. Dad! We stood there awkwardly while waiters drifted around us carrying champagne. 32 years of family history, and somehow we had nothing real left to say to each other. Then Madison appeared. White couture gown, crystal detailing, perfect makeup. She looked beautiful, and somehow that made everything sadder. Because beneath all that elegance, she still looked hungry, not emotionally, financially, socially. Like nothing was ever enough unless someone else had less. Paige, she smiled brightly, hugging me with arms that barely touched. You came. Of course I came. You brought the paperwork, right? The sentence hit so fast my brain stalled for a second. What paperwork? Madison blinked like I was being unreasonable. The transfer documents. There it was, not a conversation, not a request, an expectation. Like somewhere along the line, my family had fully convinced themselves this transfer was already happening. For the penthouse, she added quietly. Mom said you'd handle it before dinner. My pulse spiked instantly. This was bigger than pressure. They'd planned logistics around this. There were actual legal documents prepared somewhere in this hotel. Madison, I said carefully, I'm not transferring anything. Her smile flickered, tiny but noticeable. What do you mean? I mean the penthouse belongs to me. Silence. Then her voice dropped lower. Tyler and I already told people we'd be moving in after the honeymoon. I stared at her in disbelief. You announced living arrangements for property you don't own? Her expression hardened instantly. You don't even use it properly? That sentence almost made me laugh, like luxury apartments needed moral justification. You live in Somerville, she continued sharply. You don't entertain clients. You don't host charity events. What's the point of you having a place like that? There it was, the real issue, not need, status. She believed the penthouse suited her image better. And somewhere along the way, my mother convinced her that was enough reason to deserve it. The point, I said quietly, is that Grandma wanted me to have it. Madison leaned closer. And for the first time that night, her mask slipped completely. Mom's going to handle this, she whispered. The cold certainty in her voice made my stomach twist, because suddenly I realized something horrifying. They weren't hoping I'd cooperate anymore. They had already built the public moment around my refusal. Before I could answer, a woman in cream Chanel stepped directly into my path. Patricia Holloway, federal judge's wife, one of my mother's closest social allies. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Paige, she said sweetly, Victoria tells me you've been holding onto Eleanor's property while she recovers. Holding onto it, not inherited, not owned, temporary. I understood immediately. My mother had been planting this narrative for years. I forced a polite smile. I live there. Patricia's eyebrows lifted slightly. Oh, then she walked away far too quickly. And suddenly I understood the scale of what my mother had built around me. Every conversation, every rumor, every carefully worded lie, all preparing this room for one moment, one public performance, one humiliation. And standing alone near that ice sculpture, I finally realized I was already trapped inside it. I escaped to the balcony 10 minutes later because I couldn't breathe inside that ballroom anymore. Cold March wind hit my face the second the doors closed behind me. For the first time all evening, the silence felt honest. Below me, Copley Square glowed under rain-soaked streetlights while Boston traffic moved like rivers of red and white beneath the stormy sky. Inside the ballroom, laughter and jazz music floated faintly through the glass. A beautiful party hiding something rotten underneath. Exactly like my family. I gripped the stone railing tightly and tried slowing my heartbeat. That's when my phone buzzed. "Grandma," I answered immediately. "Paige." Her voice sounded calm, too calm. "What's happening?" she asked. I looked back through the ballroom windows. My mother stood near the head table smiling gracefully while speaking to a group of judges' wives like she wasn't orchestrating emotional warfare. "She's preparing something," I whispered. "I know." A chill ran through me instantly. "What do you mean you know?" "Victoria has been making calls for weeks," Grandma said quietly. "She's been building an audience." Audience. That word hit me hard because suddenly everything clicked together. The invitations, the rumors, the pressure, the social whispers. None of this was spontaneous. My mother had spent years laying the groundwork so when tonight finally happened, people would already be emotionally positioned against me. "She wants witnesses," Grandma continued. "That's how your mother operates. She needs public validation." I closed my eyes briefly. "She already prepared paperwork." Silence. Then Grandma sighed softly. "I was afraid of that. You knew, I suspected." Rain tapped softly against the balcony railing while my pulse pounded louder and louder in my ears. "Grandma, what exactly is she planning?" "I don't know the details," she admitted. "But I know this much: if Victoria corners you publicly, do not sign anything." There it was again, that warning, so serious, so specific. "Marcus Webb still has the documents ready," she added quietly. "What documents?" Another pause, longer this time. Then finally, 3 years ago, Daniel Reeves visited me. I frowned immediately. Daniel. My college friend turned investigative reporter for the Boston Globe. What does Daniel have to do with this? He found something strange. My stomach tightened instantly. Grandma's voice lowered. "A property sale on Cape Cod." Cold spread through my chest. "The beach house?" "Yes. The same house Grandma spent every summer in when I was growing up. The same house filled with blue hydrangeas and ocean air and childhood memories." "What about it?" Silence, then. "I never sold it." The world tilted sideways. I gripped the balcony harder. "What? Your mother sold it in 2020 for $875,000. Every sound around me disappeared. Jazz music, traffic, rain. "Gone. I never authorized the sale," Grandma continued carefully. "And forensic analysts concluded the signature on the transfer documents was forged." Forged. My knees nearly buckled. "Grandma, I didn't want to believe it either." I stared through the ballroom windows at my mother laughing gracefully beneath chandeliers. Beautiful, elegant, terrifying. "She forged your signature?" "Yes." I couldn't breathe correctly anymore. Because suddenly everything made horrifying sense. The sudden accusations about Grandma being confused. The push to control the penthouse. The obsession with paperwork. My mother wasn't just manipulative, she was dangerous. "That's why you moved into Brookhaven," I whispered. "Because I stopped trusting her." The words landed like broken glass. Inside the ballroom, waiters began clearing dinner plates while guests settled back into their seats. Something was starting. Some next phase, I could feel it. "Paige," Grandma said firmly, "listen to me carefully." I forced myself to focus. "If Victoria humiliates you tonight, if she pushes too far, call Marcus immediately." My heartbeat thundered. "And then what?" Grandma's voice hardened in a way I'd never heard before. "Then I stopped protecting her." The ballroom doors suddenly opened behind me. I turned sharply, and standing there smiling in a glittering silver gown was my mother. "Everyone's waiting for you," she said sweetly. Then her eyes dropped briefly to my phone, and for one terrifying second, I realized she knew exactly who I'd been talking to. My mother stood in the ballroom doorway smiling at me like she hadn't spent years quietly preparing to destroy me. "Everyone's waiting," she repeated softly. Behind her, crystal chandeliers shimmered over a sea of wealthy guests settling back into their seats after dinner. The jazz band had stopped playing. Microphones were being adjusted near the stage, and suddenly I understood. This was it. The moment, the performance she'd been building toward for 3 years. I slipped my phone into my clutch slowly. Mom's eyes lingered on it a second too long. "Who were you talking to?" she asked casually. "Grandma." Something flickered across her face instantly. Tiny, sharp, gone, then the smile returned. "Well," she said lightly, "this next part is about family." That word again, family. Funny how people only weaponize it when they want something. I followed her back into the ballroom anyway, because at that point, I needed to see how far she was willing to go. The room quieted the second my mother stepped onto the stage. Victoria Harrison in silver couture beneath crystal lights looked every bit the polished Boston social queen she spent decades pretending to be. And beside the stage sat Madison smiling like she'd already won. My pulse pounded harder. Mom lifted a champagne flute gracefully. If I could have everyone's attention, 127 faces turned toward her instantly. Judges, attorneys, doctors, investment families, every important person my mother spent years impressing, her audience, her witnesses. "I'd like to celebrate something very special tonight," she continued warmly. "A beautiful act of family love." There it was, the setup. I felt physically sick, then Mom looked directly at me. "Paige, sweetheart, come join us." The entire ballroom turned toward my table, every eye, every whisper, every expectation. I stood slowly because refusing immediately would only give her exactly what she wanted. The difficult daughter, the selfish sister. As I walked through the ballroom, I could actually feel people watching me with anticipation. Like they already knew the script, like they were waiting for me to finally play the villain. Mom wrapped an arm around my shoulders once I reached the stage. To the crowd, it looked affectionate. Up close, it felt like restraint. "As many of you know," she announced smoothly, "our mother left Paige a stunning penthouse in the Seaport district." Murmurs spread instantly through the room. Mom smiled proudly. "And tonight, Paige has chosen to share that blessing with Madison and Tyler as a wedding gift." Applause exploded. Actual applause. My stomach dropped. Then my mother pulled a folder from beneath the podium. Legal documents. "Already prepared?" My signature typed neatly across the bottom lines. The room spun slightly. She really did it. In public. In front of everyone. "All Paige needs to do," Mom continued brightly, "is sign." The applause continued while she handed me the folder. And honestly, that was the most horrifying part, not the manipulation, the certainty. My family genuinely believed public pressure would overpower my boundaries. I looked down at the papers. Transfer deed, property reassignment. Immediate ownership transfer, everything ready, everything planned. Then I looked at Madison, smiling, waiting, hungry. My voice came out quiet but steady. "I'm not signing this." The applause died instantly. Silence swallowed the ballroom whole. My mother's smile froze. "Don't be nervous, sweetheart," she laughed softly into the microphone. I said no. The room went completely still. Madison stepped closer immediately. "Paige," she hissed quietly, still smiling for guests, "don't embarrass us." "Embarrass us? Not please, not can we talk, just image management." I looked directly at my mother. "You prepared legal documents without asking me?" Mom's expression darkened slightly. "Because we knew you'd make this difficult." Gasps scattered softly through the room. "Good, let them hear it." "I'm not giving away Grandma's penthouse," I said clearly. And suddenly Madison snapped. "You don't even deserve it." The room froze. Years of jealousy exploded through her voice all at once. "You live in some tiny apartment while sitting on millions," she shouted. "Tyler and I actually have a future to build." The ballroom buzzed with whispers now. Tyler looked horrified. Dad stared at the floor, and my mother. My mother realized the performance was slipping. Fast. "Paige," she warned sharply. "No," I interrupted. "You invited me here to publicly pressure me into surrendering my inheritance." Mom's face changed instantly. Gone was the polished elegance. Gone was the social mask. Now there was only rage. "You ungrateful child." The microphone amplified every syllable across the ballroom. "You manipulated your grandmother against this family?" "No," I shot back. "Grandma gave me that home because I was the only person who actually showed up for her." The room erupted. And that's when it happened. My mother slapped me so hard my earring flew across the marble floor. A woman screamed somewhere near the back tables. The jazz pianist froze mid-note, everything stopped. My cheek burned violently, but I refused to cry. Slowly I bent down, picked up my earring, straightened it carefully. Then I looked directly at my mother. "That's the last time you ever touch me." Dead silence. I turned, walked off the stage, walked through the ballroom, walked past 127 stunned guests. And the second I reached the hotel lobby, I called Marcus Webb. "My grandmother was right," I said calmly. There was a pause, then Marcus answered quietly, "She's already on her way." 1 hour later, the doors of the ballroom opened again. And my grandmother walked in with enough evidence to destroy my mother's entire life. Every conversation inside the Fairmont Copley Plaza stopped instantly. The jazz band went silent. Champagne glasses froze midair. Even the waiters stopped moving. Because according to the story my mother spent 3 years spreading across Boston's social circles, Eleanor Harrison was supposedly confused now. Fragile, manipulated, losing her memory. Yet the woman walking into that ballroom beside Marcus Webb looked absolutely terrifying. Elegant black velvet gown, perfect posture, sharp eyes scanning the room with complete awareness. Not fragile, not confused, furious. My mother went pale the second she saw her. "Mom," she laughed nervously, "you shouldn't be here." Grandma ignored her completely. Instead, she looked directly at me. "Are you all right?" That simple question nearly broke me more than the slap itself. Because nobody else had asked. Not my father, not Madison, not a single one of the 127 guests who watched my mother hit me beneath crystal chandeliers. I nodded slowly, then Marcus Webb stepped forward carrying a leather document case. And suddenly the entire ballroom felt less like a wedding and more like a courtroom. My mother recovered quickly. She always did. "This has become a misunderstanding," she announced smoothly to the crowd. Paige became emotional over a generous family discussion. "No," Grandma interrupted calmly. "This became criminal the moment you forged my name." The room exploded into whispers. Actual gasps echoed near the back tables. Madison's face drained white instantly. Dad stood up so fast his chair scraped across marble. "Eleanor," he warned sharply, but Grandma kept speaking. "For 3 years my mother controlled the narrative. Tonight that narrative died publicly." Marcus opened the leather case and began laying documents across the head table one by one. Property transfers, bank records, forensic signature analysis, Cape Cod sale documents. Every secret my mother buried carefully beneath Boston elegance now sitting openly beneath ballroom lights. Marcus's voice carried clearly through the silence. In 2020, Victoria Harrison illegally transferred ownership of Eleanor Harrison's Cape Cod property using forged authorization documents. The room went dead still. One of the judges near table 4 physically leaned forward. My mother laughed sharply. "This is absurd." Marcus calmly slid another document toward the front tables. Forensic analysts already confirmed the signature was forged. The laughter disappeared instantly. And suddenly, every wealthy guest understood they were no longer watching family drama. They were witnessing public exposure. My mother looked at Grandma desperately. "You're doing this because Paige manipulated you." Grandma stared at her for a very long time before answering. "No, Victoria." Her voice stayed calm. "That's the tragedy. Paige was the only person in this family who never tried to manipulate me." Silence, heavy, humiliating, final. Then Grandma turned toward the guests. "For 10 years, Paige visited me every Sunday without asking for money, property, or favors. She brought flowers, fixed things around my house, sat with me when I was lonely." Her eyes shifted toward me gently. "She earned that penthouse long before I ever signed paperwork." And honestly, that sentence hurt more than the slap. Because all I ever really wanted was for someone to finally say publicly that I mattered. Then my mother snapped. Completely. The polished social mask shattered right there beneath the chandeliers. "You always loved her more," she screamed. The ballroom froze, years of jealousy poured out of her all at once. "She made you feel needed while Madison and I carried this family socially for years." There it was, the truth, not fairness, not concern, status, appearances, control. Grandma looked suddenly exhausted. "No, Victoria," she said softly, "you abandoned me once I stopped being useful to you." My mother actually staggered backward after hearing that. Madison started crying beside Tyler. Tyler looked horrified, because suddenly his beautiful Boston wedding wasn't elegant anymore. It was toxic, ugly, public. Marcus calmly handed copies of the forensic reports to two attorneys seated near the front. One of them immediately stopped smiling. The other quietly walked away to make a phone call. My mother noticed, and panic finally entered her face completely because she understood something terrible in that moment. This wasn't staying inside the family. Boston legal circles would hear about the forgery. The charity boards would hear, the museum committees, the investors, the wives who lived for gossip disguised as concern. Everything she built socially for 30 years was collapsing in real time. Then she looked at me, and for the first time in my life, my mother looked afraid of me, not because I screamed, not because I fought her physically, because I survived her publicly, quietly, completely. I walked slowly back toward the stage while the ballroom watched in total silence. Then I picked up the transfer documents she tried forcing me to sign earlier, looked down at them carefully, and tore them in half. The ripping sound echoed sharply through the ballroom. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, but something shifted, like the room finally understood the truth. I wasn't the greedy daughter. I was the daughter who refused to be erased. 3 months later, the forgery investigation became official. Dad quietly resigned from his law firm before disciplinary review could begin. Madison's wedding never appeared in Boston Society magazine despite my mother planning it for months. Tyler's family distanced themselves almost immediately. And Victoria Harrison. Within a year, she disappeared from nearly every major social board in Boston. Funny how quickly wealthy circles exile people once scandal threatens their own reputations. Grandma amended her estate one final time before she passed 18 months later. Not to change the inheritance, just to leave me a letter. Marcus handed it to me privately after the funeral. Inside, Grandma wrote, "The family spent years teaching you that keeping peace mattered more than keeping your dignity. I hope one day you understand how proud I was when you finally chose yourself publicly." I cried harder reading that letter than I did the night my mother slapped me. Because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes healing is simply hearing someone finally say, "You were never wrong for protecting what was yours." 6 months later, I moved fully into the Seaport penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor. And every Sunday morning, I place fresh tulips beside Grandma's photograph near the windows. Just like I used to. If this story shocked you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional family drama stories, inheritance betrayals, toxic family exposés, and cinematic Reddit-style storytelling. And tell me honestly in the comments, would you have walked away quietly after the slap or exposed the entire family publicly too?